This video is brought to you by the BKK OCD box. Check it out, guys. You can see mine's all dirty from being in the boat 24/7. You can either get this box empty or filled, guys. When the one that does come filled, you can see the price tag, is the Armor Point series of BKK hooks. Drop shot hooks, wacky hooks, flipping hooks, EWG hooks, the Permalock system, that's like a weighted EWG. It comes with the latch trebles right here. These are all high carbon steel hooks. This is the sharpest, strongest hooks you can buy. The cool part is the individual packages of the Armor Point come in these boxes too. So if you get them and you do buy the empty box, you can always adjust it according to the hooks that you prefer. And you can also buy the empty boxes. If you have a particular favorite hook from another brand that's not BKK, you can load it up into that system yourself. This is a super, super cool system. Now let's get to wacky rigging. All right, guys, check it out. When to throw a wacky rigged worm, right? I mean, pretty much always. Glad I can help. We'll see you next time. No, kidding aside. We are literally talking about the most versatile, deadly fish catching finesse worm tactic of all time. I remember I was probably about, I don't even know. I wasn't even a teenager when I started wacky rigging. Could have been 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I don't even know. I don't keep track of that stuff. But I remember going out of Dale's Boat Harbor. It's called River's End now in the California Delta with my dad. The first time I had read about wacky rigging. That may have even been when it came out. Who knows? I'm getting up there. And I thought I was KVD, man. I was catching so many freaking fish on a wacky rigged Zoom trick worm. It was insane. I think between my dad and I don't know, I've had so many incredible fishing days throughout the years, but I think we probably had 70, 80 fish combined, which I've had a lot more than that recently, but it was incredible. Like when you go from a young kid knowing a couple of rigs to picking up a rig and catching that many fish. My dad and I, man, I don't think we broke a 4-pounder that day. I think one close to 4 pounds is the biggest one. But that changed everything, man. That lit a fire under me. And till this day, I will swear to you, till I'm blue in the face, probably less than 10 foot deep, shallow, grassy, rocky bridges, pilings, wood, trees, boat docks, houseboats. It is hard to beat a wacky rig worm. And you guys have probably heard me over the recent years say, it's the best insurance rig for shallow water bass fishing. So I will tell you right now, well, on my rating system, I gave my last one a 0 through 10. 0 means you shouldn't learn it at all. 10, this is a 10 plus. If I could go over 10, I would. The wacky rig is 100% vital. If you bass fish and you don't have a wacky rig ready in the rod locker, and I know, and we're going to get into the when not to, okay? Because a lot of the times you won't see a wacky rig on my deck, but I always carry that insurance in my rod locker, okay? It's the best shallow water worm fishing technique ever. There's really two worms, okay? There's really two worms that you really need. And you can argue with me all you want. I have zero affiliation to Zoom. In fact, I don't even know where Zoom went. Do they even advertise anymore? That's crazy. The Zoom trick worm, arguably one of the most successful worms of all time until Gary Yamamoto came out with the Senko, okay? Still, till this day, I always have multiple bags of each in my boat, and I'll kind of get into that and why. Super slow, shallow, roaming fish, typically my trick worm, bedding fish, fish that are in less than 3-4 foot of water. The trick worm's always going to be it for me. When fish are deeper, or if I have to make a longer cast and that worm needs to fall a little bit faster, the Senko's always going to be it for me. There is some variables, okay, like the Yamamoto Sensei right here. Incredible. I have, a variety of different colors. And I'll tell you straight off the bat, this ain't a how-to wacky rig video, so I'm not going to get into that. I always carry a pumpkin, which is a brown with black speckle. I always carry a green pumpkin, and I always carry baby bass. And that's the vast majority. I will have some shad pattern Senkos for lakes where I know they're on bait fish, and I'll get into that a little later, maybe in a how-to video. But my shad packages is the least amount of the colors I carry: brown, green pumpkin, baby bass. Okay, this is the greatest shallow water finesse fishing technique ever, and I'm going to tell you about where it truly shines. So when you see me throwing a wacky wacky rig worm, man, I was getting all tongue twisted there, versus something else, I'll tell you right now, and I'm going to get into even the when not to, because it's such a good rig. You can literally fish it year round, up to about 15, 20 feet. They have weighted wacky hooks. Yeah, and it works great hopping it off the bottom in deep water too. There's other rigs I'll start to lean to at that point. But year round, if you're a good wacky rig fisherman and you have an assortment of worms, you have an assortment of jig heads, you could fish it successfully year round. There will be a lot of days where the experienced guys will outfish you, and that's conditional and what they're feeding on. And that's part of the when not to fish a Senko. I mean, when to fish a wacky rig, and we're going to get into that. So right off the bat, I'm going to tell you where it truly shines is less than 10 feet. When that worm hits that water and it's undulating, that means bending back and forth on the hinge. Basically, you have the hook in the middle, okay, like that. And that worm's just falling down, undulating. I don't even know if it's a real word. My buddy Andy Cuccia taught me that word years ago, and I love it. It's undulating. That just means that motion on the do nothing fall. All right. That is one of the best, most natural techniques ever. I've watched on live scope. I've watched crystal clear water where all three species, smallies, largies, spots, will come up. They will analyze those worms and stare and just eat it on do nothing. Literally the easiest rig to catch fish on of all time. Yeah, I don't think you can argue with that. Anyone can fish it. You can fish an exposed little mosquito hook. You can take anyone out for the first time and they can throw a wacky rig worm and catch a lot of fish. There's literally no arguing. Where it really shines is those shallow months. Pre-spawn, spawn, sometimes during the post-spawn, around shade pockets or grass lines. Once again, fall rolls around, they start chasing bait fish. Early winter to midwinter, still really good rig if you get it near the bottom. During the shad die off, that's that exception where I have those shad patterns. Exceptional. And where I'm gonna pick up one of my win knots on my note board over here. Win knots is you're not gonna see it on my deck a lot of the times in the summer months. Okay, why is that? Well, the majority of big bass go deep or into heavy cover, or under boat docks, or into heavy shade, or behind heavy structures. Okay, now if I'm fishing a piling on a bridge, okay, and it's got a big shade line in the middle of the summer, sure, I can throw a wacky Senko up there, let it fall down there and catch them. There's an exception for catching big ones. Okay, on vertical structure and cover like a shear wall, a piling, a wacky rig is incredible. A standing timber, wacky rig's incredible. Anything where the fish can hold on vertically, and you throw that wacky rig there and let it fall on a slack line, you just watch that slack. That is where the wacky rig is insanely deadly. The water can be as slick as you possibly want. Zero wind. It can be gin clear. Other species, like you could have bluegills, you can have crawdads, you can have minnows, you can have silver sides, golden shiners, trout swimming around. I don't care what's swimming there. If you throw like a green pumpkin Senko, you will still get bit. You don't even have to match the forage base. Yeah, it helps, but that's how good that rig is, okay? Now, so let's get into when I'm going to throw it over anything else. Roaming fish. When I see bass up roaming around because we don't have wind, it's slick, they're just roaming. They're not actively feeding. A trick worm style right here. This is actually not a zoom trick worm. This is the finesse worm by Big Bite Baits. Here's a zoom trick worm right here. There's a lot of variables. Like I said, I'll throw the sensei, I'll throw a few variables, but trickworm and senko are always the best. Roaming fish, like I literally see a fish roaming under the surface. That trickworm style bait on like a super finesse setup, like the Sticks Finesse Stick, you could throw out 20 foot in front of them and catch them. I'm going to put in the description of this video, during the pre-spawn and spawn, a trick I use to target the females because I don't want to catch males. Those are the ones protecting beds. That time of year, pre-spawn, spawn, is when you see a lot of those roaming fish. That's where that trickworm comes in real deadly, okay? That finesse worm, the big bite finesse worm right there, the Yamamoto sensei right there, very, very deadly. If I don't see them roaming around and I still know they're up shallow, they're probably a little closer to the bottom, then I'm probably going to go more senko. Okay, that's what I'm going to throw that because it's got that faster sink. Now, so what happens is when I get into that summertime, and you don't see it on my deck anymore. If you do see it on my deck in the summertime, they're probably suspended under boat docks, and I'm literally skipping. I put that little Frenzy Wacky saddle on there on a senko, or the tiny one, and I put it on a trickworm. It's harder to skip the trickworm because it doesn't have a lot of mass. Senko's got a lot of mass. It tears up a little easy, but that salt and that combination of the pour, they hang on to it forever, which is incredible. It's hard to miss. But I'm skipping it under boat docks into the shade or under houseboats where the bass are suspended. Okay, so that's that exception when you see it on my deck during the summer. And another big reason for that is, unless I'm throwing on the edge of a weed line where I know there's shade down there and they'll come out and get it, I typically don't want to encourage a bass to move on any finesse technique. I'm stumbling all over words today. I want to bring the finesse technique to their face. Or it works so slow, like on that slow undulation, it's almost like a jerkbait where it stops in the middle of the water column and drives them crazy. That super slow undulation, whether fish are feeding off the surface, they're suspended feeding mid-water column, or they're down on the bottom, they have so much time to notice it falling in the water column, just doing that the whole way, that it's just so darn natural and so convenient and so slow, they just come right over. A lot of the times when you're throwing a wacky rig, you won't even know. You just go to pick up and you're like, oh, it's swimming away. They don't even strike it. They just suck it up and slowly move. It's just, it doesn't look like an active piece of forage that they need to run down and kill. It's just easy and they suck it up. All right. So that's where those summer months, I don't want to encourage them to come forward. Anytime I have to encourage bass to come to something in the warmer months, it's either going to be a bigger top water or something with bigger presence where I can filter out small fish. Because once you get over 60 degrees, past spring, a lot of active fish were going to race towards something. And getting a 2-pounder and 1-pounder to race towards a little tiny trickworm or a senko falling out in the middle of the water column, and there's a 5-pounder right behind it, that 5-pounder, she's not going to go compete with that little dink to run it down. But in the spring, when they're feeding up, they're gorging. Big ones will run down small stuff. And the same thing later in winter, as it starts to cool, they have to bulk up for winter. So the big fish will come out and get that slow moving worm. But when you have a lot of competitive smaller bass in there, I don't think it's a great time to throw a wacky worm. And that's oftentimes where you'll see me doing a lot of other stuff. I'm going to throw that wacky worm when I know fish are roaming. When I know fish are actively feeding, when I know fish are not actively feeding, just because it's so dang finessey. All right. I'm probably going to throw that over the vast majority of rigs pre-spawn, spawn. Okay. You're going to see other rigs take over in the post-spawn, rigs that can get down there, like my last video with the Neko rig, in the grass or deeper. All right. Now I could throw a weighted wacky worm and still get down there and still catch those fish, and it still be very effective. I'm going to fish a wacky worm typically 0 to 15, though I've caught fish in 30 on weighted wacky heads lots of times. It excels on shallow fish in tough conditions, in clean water, in dirty water. Doesn't seem to matter. When is another time I'm not going to throw it? Typically, if I get to a body of water that I'm unfamiliar, do I know if there's fish there or not? I will throw a wacky worm if it's slick, calm, sunny, and clear. But I'm still going to try like top waters to see if I can move fish. Soft plastic swim baits, probably with no underspin if there's no wind or no overcast or a little stain to the water, strictly because I want to move across water to cover faster. But if I'm not getting any love, I will still throw it at a new lake. The difference is you could fish a wacky worm fast. My buddy Tai Yao is actually very well known for fishing a wacky worm extremely fast, a wacky Senko. He'll go down the bank burning and he won't even let it get deep. Sometimes he'll nail it, but he won't even let it get deep. So sorry, Ty, if I'm exposing you, bro, but he'll fish it remarkably fast. And because he believes it'll draw fish up from deeper too. And of course he believes it's because he's won a ton of tournaments doing it. Okay. So typically, if it's a large flat, if it's a large do nothing bank without a bunch of brush, like I don't see nothing, I feel like fish may be down in rocks, I'm probably not going to fish a wacky worm unless like I see roaming fish or it's slick, calm, and gin clear. Okay. I'm going to fish another moving bait. So that's another time I wouldn't fish a wacky rig. So I'm reading my notepad over here. Active small fish. When I need to cull up. If you guys don't know what culling is, it's a tournament term for getting a bigger fish than what you have in the live well. Okay, you're trying to weigh the biggest bag possible. If I am not getting big bites on a wacky worm, or if I'm getting too many small bites, I'm going to put it down, or I'm going to pick up like a 7-inch Senko and go big. All right. Typically, if I'm looking for big fish outside of pre-spawn and spawn, I'm probably not throwing a wacky worm. Wacky worm, I'm generally looking for numbers. And don't get me wrong, biggins eat it at random all the freaking time. So that's another time I'm probably not going to be throwing it if I'm looking to call up. And I mentioned it in the summer, typically not throwing it unless I'm skipping into shade. Large flats, typically not throwing it unless there's pockets in the grass. If I see a pocket out in the grass bed or like a lane between some riprap, like say on the Delta, a rock wall, the tide goes up and down and there's that trough behind that grass line, then I will throw it in behind there just because they can ambush it. Low light hours, first thing in the morning, as the sun's setting, typically I want to throw a moving bait. I want to go big. That's prime time. Unless I'm still catching big ones as the sun's going out or as the sun's going, if I get there, I'm typically going to throw a moving bait, a big top water, some sort of reactionary bait during low light hours instead of a wacky worm. So I'm trying to think if I missed anything for you guys. I really wanted to kind of just wrap your head around where I really want to throw it and where I don't throw it. But you can literally fish a wacky rig year round around the whole country. You just have to make adjustments. Like I said, in the summertime, you may have a problem with too many small fish, but you can always go bigger. You can get it in the shade. You can fish it deeper. You can weight it. You could do a variation of the weighted wacky rig between kind of like a Necco rig, but it's a weighted wacky rig where the worm's still hooked, in the middle like so, but you have a nail weight in the end and you're shaking it on slack line. You don't have the hook in the side and maintaining a tight line like a Necco rig. How you use is what makes a big, big difference there. But the wacky rig catches them year round, no matter where you go, if you know how to adjust to it. And it drives a lot of experts crazy on open tournaments where a dude that's been bass fishing for a couple of years comes in with a wacky Senko and wins the tournament where, we've got 25, 30 years of experience under our belt and the Senko guy beats us. But there's a reason for that, guys. It's the deadliest shallow water finesse technique of all time. I'm Nick, the Informative Fisherman. If you like this video, guys, hey, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, a follow if you can. If not, whatever, throw a thumbs down. I don't care, man. It's all good. Any variations of wacky rigs, old videos, cool catch videos, I'm going to try to throw it in the description. If this is on Facebook, I'll come back and I'll post one of the videos in the comment section just so you guys can see a large variety around the subjects that I'm talking about. Appreciate you guys watching. See you next time.